What's up, boys and girls? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be having a look at Impact versus Zest, which was played last week in the Oldie Mall League 177, I want to say it was. I'm not sure, I think it was like a semi-final match or a quarter-final match. Of course, if you want to get the replays yourself, feel free to subscribe to Oldie Mall League's Patreon. I'll leave a link of that somewhere down in the description below. But for now, let's get into Impact versus Zest. So Impact is one of these guys that is known for being extremely aggressive, whether that be in the early game or in the mid game. Well, in the late game, he usually doesn't come there, so he can be too aggressive there. On the other hand, we have Zest, who is known to like to repeat what he usually does. Just the same again and again and again and again for Mr. Zest. The majority of the time, we see wall with a very special wall in here on Zen. Now, Zen is the only map that we've had in the past 2.5 years, which actually has two entrances into the natural. So we see we have this main entrance and we have this weird small entrance, which can be blocked by a single pylon or by a pylon and a gate. However you want to do it. I don't really care. You can do what you want. I don't like his wall here too much, but we'll see how we follow this up. So, second Cybercore. This pylon feels like a big vulnerability. And he opens up with core first as well. So, if you see this core before the Nexus, this means you usually will get your adapt by about 10 seconds faster. So, the Zerg will need to adapt to that. Now, this can also be because Zest scouted that there was a very fast pool with very fast gases, which means that there might be some aggression coming out of Impact himself. Where's our second pylon? Second pylon is in the main base. And we see the first links hitting the field. Well, I guess there's a third pylon, as there was a little bit of a pylon block on the other side of the map by Zest. Now this will block the natural of Impact for a very long time. Usually this hatchery goes down at what? 48 seconds if it's a hatch first, and otherwise maybe 110. So this was delayed somewhere between 1 minute and 10 seconds and just a full minute. That's a very, very long time to be blocked on your natural, I have to admit. The main will get oversaturated, your income will be less, you have less larva to produce units from. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some form of aggression from Impact here. Maybe a bunch of links. On the other hand, Zest also most likely is expecting that. So perhaps he will be doing something completely different. Third pylon will be built on the low ground here for Zest. And we'll be starting that wall towards his natural. Third base goes down for Impact, so it won't be any roach type of aggression. Could still, of course, be a Ling Flood, as you don't need that many minerals for that. But the way I'm looking at this is there's a lot of gas being mined for Impact. There is drones in production, 3 bases. This will most likely just be heading into a more standard macro game. And Zest opener is extremely weird. Opening up with 2 gates, double adapt into sentry. No real form of tech whatsoever, a battery, so Zest right now is very afraid. The only information he has is that there's a natural. He didn't manage to see that there's a third base as well. So Zest is afraid of something like a Baneling Bust, maybe something of a Roach all-in. But we actually see Impact playing macro, so Impact actually kind of playing with his image there of being an aggressive or an all-in-ish player, and Zest trying to bait him into an all-in with a weird wall off on this little area, a very late wall off onto his secondary wall. So didn't really work, the bait didn't work, but I still think Zest is in a fine position. He delayed the natural for so long that I think this opener is completely fine. And this is a very interesting mind game. So we see a prism being hallucinated out of one of the 2 sentries. Now, Impact is not spotting that prism, which actually is bad for Zest. Zest ideally would want this prism to be spotted by an Overlord or a Ling patrolling somewhere in the middle of the map. Because right now he shows his prism, and if Impact would click the prism and he'd see how much HP is missing, he would be able to realize that it's a hallucinated prism and be like, hey, why are you hallucinating a prism? Like, what kind of trick are you trying to pull on me? And he would have some extra information. And the trick that Zest is trying to pull on him is that he wants to force out some units, preferably roaches, but also lynx is fine, and then get mass phoenixes in the back of this. So you want to force out ground units if you're playing mass air, obviously, because ground units can't really shoot up. Well, roaches can't, at least. That's what Zest is going for here. Like, he's showing a couple of sentries. This looks a lot like a robotics facility opener, because usually when someone opens Stargates, you don't really want to be spending your gas into sentries early on. So all of this It's just making sure there's no spores being built. There's only 4 queens on the map, which is extremely low. And perhaps it will force out some units as well. Like perhaps we'll see a couple of roaches being built. Impact, however, not scared at all. Just produces another 11 drones. Starts going into gas number 4 and 5. We have a hallucinated Phoenix here going in for a scout. Sees the Evo chamber. Sees the lair. Of course, he doesn't know if it's about to finish. She can't really see the progress properly until it's done. And Zest has a pretty decent idea of what's happening here. Now here we finally see those roaches in production as Impact is starting to get a little bit afraid. And a Spire as well. Now you could say, hey, a Spire against Stargate. That's kind of okay, right? You got your Corruptors, but in this case it's not actually okay. Because I think this is a Spire meant for Mutas. And Corruptors that are this reactionary to a double Stargate Phoenix usually don't manage to do too much. So I think Impact is going to actually take a lot of damage from this. His drone count isn't as high as he would ideally like it to be. His queen count isn't as high as he ideally would like it to be. And he doesn't have any spores anywhere, meaning all of these overlords could go down for free as well. Now we've already seen, what is it? Oh, 4 queens. This is the 4th queen going down right now. These overlords will be taking a beating as well. There's no +1 on the way for Zest. We have no +1 done yet, so these Phoenixes won't be dealing too much damage, but they should be able to kill every single drone here, as just a single spore without any queen support will take absolute eons to kill a single Phoenix. And Phoenixes, well, they basically 2 or 3 shot a drone, and if you have this many, you're gonna be able to lift 2-3 drones at the same time, and we're completely fine with that. Usually a good way to check if your double Stargate Phoenix is working out is to check the amount of energy you have on the Phoenixes. And if you can't lift anything anymore, usually it means it was alright. Now, we do see a little bit of a counter-attack here, a couple of links, couple of roaches, but a quick pullback by Zest, and he has enough ground army to deal with this. I mean, he didn't really need to send all the Phoenixes back, he could have just used these units. Perhaps he was afraid of a bigger unit flood, and that's why he pulled back into his natural, sent back the Phoenixes, but it wasn't necessary. And right now Zest is in such a good position. He followed this up in a very weird way. Double Robo into Fleet Beacon and 3rd Stargate. Now, we do see those Corruptors are finished basically. And if I were Zest, I would probably start my +1 air weapons as soon as possible, as you really need air weapons to deal with Corruptors. Most of the time the Corruptor player himself will also get some kind of upgrade. Most of the time the Carapace upgrade, because Phoenixes of course shoot twice. So any kind of armor upgrade also works twice, which is also why attack upgrades on Phoenixes are so absolutely amazing. Because they work twice basically. You upgrade both weapons. So you have 2 guns, and if you upgrade them at the same time, double the amount of DPS. Well, added DPS. Now these Phoenix are doing a lot of damage. Take a look at the units lost tab. We see 3.2k resources lost here for Impact, and only 1.2k lost for Zest. It's probably a couple of probes, couple of adepts that went down earlier, but in general still a very good game for Zest. I mean, he's ahead in supply, he's up in workers. Impact's 4th base started at the 8-minute mark. Usually you want to start it at maybe 5:20. So it's about 2-3 minutes, 2.5 to 3 minutes late. There's a bunch of Corruptors on the way, and there's an infestation pit as well on the way. So he does have some prospects for the later game. Perhaps we'll be able to go into something like Infestor Corruptor, or he will be going to Hive with that infestation pit to get these Vipers out. Now we see Zest desperately trying to get in more damage, even though it's not really necessary. He is such a nice lead. He can lose a Phoenix or 2 trying to kill a couple more drones. That's completely fine. He should not be in any trouble. Now, Zest hasn't been doing nothing. He's been building voidrays. He's been getting flux veins, which is the new upgrade, which increases the speed, and you see how extremely fast they are. It's flux veins. This is the little icon here. +1 is about to finish, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised to see him just fly across the map with these voidrays in a minute or 2. Basically just A-move his way to victory, as there's a lot of Corruptors, but right now Impact really believes that there's a ground switch coming. I mean, Impact saw the two robos. Who goes 2 robos into 9 voidrays? That makes absolutely no sense. This was an absolutely great bait here by Zest, who baits the Corruptors into an area where they can't really escape towards Queens anymore. And now the voidrays will just be able to chase down all of these Corruptors. See that the damage output of voidrays is so insane, and with the speed upgrade they're completely fine chasing these Corruptors. He will be able to get all of these in the end, I believe. Good micro there coming out of Zest. Couple more void rays coming in as well. Phoenixes doing continuous damage, and once these void rays are out, the only anti-air that there's gonna be is gonna be queens and infestors. There's a couple of ravagers as well, which can of course bile these void rays and phoenixes down, but you're gonna have to trust on your opponent mismicroing a little bit. We see a big move out here from Zest, who's up the 10 supply. Tries to move forward. Very careful, as you can see, just targeting down spore per spore. He does have a bunch of chargels here, but the ground army should be able to be dealt with by whatever impact has. However, the air army is what I'm really scared for here, as a bunch of void rays are moving forward. Fungals are being landed. A couple of good biles actually hitting all of these void rays, but I feel like the army of impact might just be a little bit too small. A couple more good biles. A lot of the void rays actually went down there. What happened there? Holy cow. I believe this is the laughing emoji in Korean. So Impact is having an absolute blast. That was some really poor micro by Zest, who just was dancing on top of those biles basically. Got fungled. I did say that's a combination that you have to be very afraid of with the void rays, of course, because they tend to clump up so much. And these biles with the splash damage and the fungal with the slow and the added damage, it can do a lot, but I feel like if you just spread out a little bit there, there's really no other anti-air than these biles. If you just dodge them, or if you just split up the void rays that only a single void ray can be hit at the same time, then sure, you might lose 1 or 2 void rays, but you still have like 10 void rays remaining. Right now we see Zest will be getting into carrier, and even though he just had an absolutely terrible fight, as resources lost is kind of evened up, he still has a chance in this game. Like, he's building immortals, he's getting more void rays, he's adding carriers as well as a Templar archive, so he will be going into Storm. And once you get Storm as a Protoss, anything is possible again at that point. And his supply isn't even that bad either. Like, sure, being down 40 supply isn't the best, but don't forget, this is against a player who has 17 roaches in his army. And roaches don't shoot up, and generally are quite bad against immortals and void rays. Like, that's the absolute hard counter to roaches, immortals and void rays. So we see a big push coming out of here for Impact. Zest has a lot of vision here with 3 observers really just spotting the same area. Will be able to get into position, and he's actually getting a very good supply count at this moment. He's up to 175 again. Tried some harass with his prism, but does get caught by these corruptors. Very curious to see if Zest micro will be as poor as in that last fight. There's so many immortals here though. 4 immortals. And last fight, basically Zest had nothing to do with the ground army of Impact. But in this case, I think there's a lot to do with the ground army of Impact, as well as a lot to do with the air army of Impact. I kind of feel like Zest army composition is a lot more well-rounded out now than it was before. Big, well, I'm not sure if this was intended to be a flank. I think it was supposed to be a run by into that third base. With Impact being very, very cautious with moving out as well, but his army really isn't improving. I mean, before he had a 40-50 supply lead with basically the same army, and now he has a 6 supply lead. Sure, he added a bunch of banelings, maybe a couple of more Ravagers. Infestors have more energy as well, and here we go. Good biles once again raining down on top of all of these void rays, but these immortals really are putting in a lot of work, and yeah, this time I don't think it's gonna be enough. And Zest with the offensive question mark. What's up, Impact? He asked. Because that fight was not good for Impact. I wish I could read Korean, as I'd love to know what this means. But as I have absolutely no clue, we'll just pretend he said, "Don't worry, my friend, I'm still gonna destroy you in the next couple of minutes." But I'm not really seeing it here for Impact, as this is a very powerful army coming out of Zest, and you really need Vipers against an army with this many air units. You're gonna need to be able to do some run-bys. Of course, we have +2 on those links, which means that if you turn those links into banelings, you will be able to one-shot probes. So baneling run-bys will be extremely powerful, and that's exactly what Impact is going for here. He's adding more and more corruptors. 13 corruptors out right now, but there's also 7 void rays. There's a bunch of archons, and these deal with corruptors extremely well. This run-by will be able to do a lot of damage, but the real question is, will Impact be able to survive? A couple of infestors trying to join the fray as well. But this ground army, without fungal, the biles will do a lot less against the air army as well, as they shouldn't be able to stay in position. So these banelings will be able to kill a lot of workers. They do manage to kill a lot of workers. But at the same time, he's losing his own 4th base. He's losing a lot of workers for free. Big run by towards the 5th as well. I think Impact might be able to save this just barely. Corruptor's actually doing some good damage here onto that carrier. Managed to snipe 1 carrier. I believe he lost maybe 1 or 2 Corruptors for that, but that's an okay trade generally. And this Link run by is doing a lot of damage, putting Zest basically on, well, what is it? 2 base economy once again. 2.5 perhaps. We still have the 4th and the 5th mining, and here comes the big engagement. Lots of banelings going forward. Baals raining on top of this army in combination with the Fungal, doing so much damage. And Zest just isn't microing. It's very weird to see. Just keep sending in the Baals over and over. His army is so much better. And I don't really know what he was doing there, honestly. Another couple of Baals hitting just this carrier straight on top of the carrier. What an uncharacteristic game out of Zest, who usually is known for his fantastic micro, but here just absolutely refused to even move his units out of Baals. Such a weird way to fight. We see a recall coming in out of Zest. Recalls a bunch of zealots, and I mean, even without micro, these fights aren't even that bad. That's the worst part. Like, these fights are still so close because Zest's army composition is just so much better than his opponents. Sure, it's not easy to move out of Baals if you're being fungled, if you're focusing on other things, but if you're a professional StarCraft player, I do believe you should be capable of running away from a spell like that. Now we do have Impact re-expanding towards that top location. This will be his 5th base. Zest actually has okayish income, slightly higher than Impact has, because he's mining off 2 fresh bases, and Impact really only is mining of 1 fresh base. This base is practically empty. I think Impact smells blood though. Blood in the water here. As he has a bunch of banelings with this army. There's a bunch of roaches, a lot of links as well. His army supply is a lot higher. However, there's a couple of batteries, zealots being positioned in the back, so they won't be hit by the banelings immediately. Some nice blink micro coming out of Zest now, so now that he's very far behind, he decides it's time to start microing. There's a full wall here. In combination with these stalkers, we'll be able to keep that. We see the corruption ability being used on the Nexus. A lot of the banelings just walking into this Archons, the zealots flanking on top of those queens, and a very good fight by Zest. Don't get me wrong, this was probably as good as it was gonna get for Zest, but now Impact just had too much stuff. I mean, he really messed this game up. There's one more Immortal, I guess, coming out. Oh, a Prism being built here for Zest. Such an odd decision once again, and with 4 zealots against, well, 7 roaches, a bunch of corruptors and queens, I don't think it's going to be enough. GG gets called. Impact manages to win this, well, extremely weird game, honestly. And congratulations to him. Very well done. And now don't forget to subscribe, boys, like. I'll see you boys next time. And Merry Christmas to all. Bye-bye.